All right, Schaefer, let's get you to Nebraska here for a little bit. DB and I were actually talking about something kind of off air and haven't gotten to it on air yet, so I want to get your take on it. I tend to look at where guys that have left Nebraska end up, what they look like on other rosters, where they're expected to play, if they're expected to play. And as you look around the country and you see some of these guys, whether it's Butler or,
James Williams.
James Williams down at Florida State, you've got Malachi Coleman up in Minnesota, whoever, right? And you're looking and they're all in different situations. But when you look at some of these guys that are expected to contribute to other power conference teams and potentially quality power conference teams, um, and then you look at Nebraska's roster and the places that those guys left, and you look at least for me, I go, well, I don't know that they're necessarily, not that they wouldn't have been useful, but I don't know that I'm going to miss them. Like, I guess, how do you
Oh,
process
tough.
that when you're looking at Nebraska's ability to evaluate talent and recruit and build up depth?
Tough.
Well, I think you have to at least acknowledge every situation's a little bit different. The
Sure.
reason that Jamari Butler and Malachi Coleman left aren't the same thing. Um, you know, BC and I talk about this quite a bit. And like Prince Will Uman for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think nationally, when he left Lincoln, there was a feeling like, oh, wow, Nebraska just lost an incredible talent. There's no way they can replace that. And yet, internally, it wouldn't shock me if Nebraska felt better about what Willis McGahee was doing for them last year than what Prince Will was. And so, sometimes it's the people who see the roster every day relative to the guys that are trying to rank transfer portal players, which is a really hard endeavor. We think high school recruiting is hard. We think junior college recruiting rankings are hard. Like transfer portal rankings is very, very far from an exact science. And so sometimes it's just like a guy leaves and it's like, yeah, he's talented. Like I think he's good, but I don't know that Nebraska lost someone that they couldn't replace there. And so I just use Prince Will as an example, and I don't mean anything offensive there. The one guy where I kind of look at it like it'd be really nice if you had him, but I'm sort of fascinated because when I searched his name the other day just to see, he didn't make Bruce Feldman's top 100 list. He hasn't been mentioned a whole lot on Twitter. Jamari Butler. Like
It's going to
I'm
play
sort
a
of
significant
fascinated.
role in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, like I'm just sort of like fascinated by this. And he's the guy that, and I've always kind of been a Jamari Butler guy. I like his personality. I like him. I think you could make an argument he was Nebraska's best defensive player against the best team that they played in Ohio State. Like we know he can be disruptive. He had a weird year, I think, because of injuries. That's the sort of one guy where it's like, man, if they had him, that would be really nice with this defensive
Oh, the
setup right
opposite,
now.
the
But
opposite
I think,
Ravi take.
yeah, I mean, it's just that's sort of where I'm at with it. But I only know Nebraska version of Jamari Butler. I don't know how things are going down at LSU. I think they could have used the James Williams. They could have used some of these guys. But ultimately, I don't know that there was any loss that it was, unsustainable. The one with Butler is it'd be nice to have a veteran presence along that defensive line that's played actual snaps. And they've got guys that have played some snaps, but they don't really have, the sheer veteran leader in that room that maybe you would love to have. Now, quite frankly, they could completely, not need that, and it could go completely well for him. But I would have loved to have seen Jamari Butler finish his career out at Nebraska.
Shafe, let me ask you about, so if you're talking about developing situations for Nebraska from today when you're going to go put eyeballs on it to where they may be in week 4 or 5, who maybe changes the most or is the quickest to answer some of the questions that you may have about the group fall camp?
So I think to do this exercise, you have to look at the positions where there's a fair amount of depth and a fair amount of opportunity.
Okay.
I think that we could see, Nebraska has a bunch of veteran defensive backs, but I don't know that it's a guarantee that these guys are going to hang on to all of the reps and all of the opportunity as we get into Big Ten play. And so, who that is will remain to be seen. But when you have some of these younger guys that are pushing, eventually you're going to try to get them on the field, whether that's because of injury or whether that's because of performance. So I look at defensive back as a room where it could look different in the middle of the season than it does at the start. Offensive line, same thing, because I think they have quite a few options that, if someone isn't working out great for you, you can try something there. And so, and the opposite is true, right? Like with the offensive line, they may just hit on it right away. You may have your starting five, and if they're healthy, they're just your starting five for as long as they're healthy. I mean, so it sort of works both ways there. But then there's the positions, like I'm not expecting, barring injury, any change at running back or at quarterback, or, even sort of who the top group is along the defensive line. Though that's an area where maybe someone or another has a strong performance that raises into the equation. But a lot of it for me is just the heavier depth spots, the defensive back and offensive line. I think Nebraska could potentially make some moves there, or rotate guys if there's some young players that are really giving them a reason to put them in. I don't think this staff will hesitate to play someone younger, even if it comes at the expense of someone who started for multiple years. They know they need to win football games. It's not this sort of system where it's like, okay, this guy's put in all his time, now it's his time to get to do it. It doesn't work that way.
God, it's interesting too, because you look at like Big Ten media days, you look at like the Big Ten camp. To your point, the assumption is made that the veteran presence in the secondary is the strength, yet that's the first group that you just talked about looking at. And you're probably not alone. Sam intimated it, that's the group that you may see change the quickest. Does that mesh with you? And if it does, what do you think it says?
Well, I think they have a lot of guys that they like. And Addison Williams, I asked him last week, what is it that you're going to use to try to pare this down? And he kind of gave his criteria and a lot of his communication and consistency. And then he kind of gave a longer sort of viewpoint on the idea of being able to make plays. Like, they need guys that can make plays. If you're competent back there, that's great. But competent may not win you the football game. You kind of need a guy who knows when to make the right gamble at the right time and come away with the football, or can punch that ball out before the receiver can fully secure it, or can come up and make a tackle in the hole and shows intuition and instincts while doing it. I mean, these are it sounds simple when we talk about it, but just because you have a wealth of snaps doesn't mean that you have the ability to necessarily do that. I go to the USC game and I look at what happened with, a Malcolm Hartzog, and I don't want to just pick on him because I feel like he gets talked about unfairly, negatively too much for a guy who has made plays throughout his career. But if someone struggles like that in 2025, my expectation is they have enough depth in the defensive back room that someone else should be able to come in for Malcolm Hartzog. You shouldn't have situations where a guy struggles like that through the course of the game and there's nobody else to go to. They have the bodies back there. And so, some of it is going to be on Williams and Butler and Snow. How quick is too quick of a hook? If a guy makes a mistake or he makes a couple mistakes, do you let him continue to play through it? Or do you say, all right, we got Donovan Jones. All right, we got Caleb Benning. All right, we got Amari Sanders. All right, we've got Jeremiah Charles. All right, we've got Jameer Khan. I mean, none of those guys I expect to be the starter in Arrowhead. All of those guys I expect to play at some point. And for them to be able to play, they're going to have to take somebody's job.
Schaefer, I wonder, it's interesting.
He got me motivated. Okay, Schaefer.
Let's go. Take somebody's job. No, it's interesting you brought up Hartzog, because I was actually talking about him earlier today. And I do wonder, like, Hartzog's a really interesting guy because
you better leave my guy alone.
No, I actually defended him. I think that Hartzog's super interesting because I think he's one of the guys that we end up criticizing a lot because we don't like how it looks. I also think he's one of the guys that's willing to put himself in positions that may not be optimal for him because that's what the team needs in that moment. And understanding, kind of like what Coach Rule talked about over the weekend, where he's like, oh, some guys will be like, oh, I don't want to play right tackle. I don't want to look stupid or be in a spot where I could mess up. Whereas, he used Mosey as an example, but I think Hartzog fits this as well, where I think a lot of the times, and this goes to myself included, sometimes we don't always appreciate what we're watching with a guy in the secondary where he's maybe doing something he's not normally asked to do. Like, how much of that do you think, I guess to your point about depth, I'm hoping guys aren't forced to do that this year, where you've got guys that are equipped for those positions instead of having to ask a guy to compromise himself?
Yeah, I mean, I think the belief we want to have is you have all this depth, so you should be able to slide people into roles. So if you do have a situation where someone needs to come in, then they can do it, and you're not putting them in a bad spot. And I agree. I mean, Malcolm Hartzog has had to play safety, he's had to play boundary corner, he's played nickel, he's done all of these different things. And again, I don't want to just use him exclusively as an example. I mean, we can use Isaac Gifford from last year as somebody where there was just too often moments where he would not be in the right spot, and yet Nebraska, it felt like, just had to play through it with him. And when you are trying to win games, when you're trying to maximize your roster, when you're trying to show to the recruiting world that you're willing to put young guys in situations, I think you have to take that risk. And if you have the depth and you don't recruit 7,000 defensive backs and bring in 2,000 of them and then claim that you can't go to another guy on the roster if someone keeps making mistakes. So, at some point, like, the proof needs to be in the pudding of their evaluation and their development. I guess to come all the way back around to it, like, they are building these guys up to put them into game situations. If they think they're ready, they have to be willing to fire that bullet when time comes. Or we're just going to sit here and talk about veterans who make the same mistakes over and over. What did we do all of last year when dissecting Nebraska's defensive backfield? I mean, we talked about their inability to keep their eyes in the right place, against play action, their run fits, all of these different things. You can't have that again this year. You really can't.
You know what's interesting? I'm just listening and I'm soaking it all in. And maybe I'm misremembering, Schaefer, but help me. Didn't we go through a stretch at the tail end of last year and in the offseason where we found ourselves questioning Coach Cooper's evals? We got all these DBs, and where are these guys? And maybe I'm misremembering the narrative, and I know you'll correct me, but it seems like that. And now we're to the point where Donovan Jones and Caleb Benning and Rex Guthrie and Tanner Turch and Braylon, like, these guys are showing up. So is it us being impatient? Did I misremember the narrative? Coop was actually pretty good at what he's doing, and they're good at developing. Like, where do you kind of land the plane as I'm kind of listening to this last 7-8 minutes about the defensive backs?
Yeah, I think all of that can be true.
Was that, am I misremembering, or was that a thing with Coop?
I don't think you are.
Okay.
I think a lot of it was they have legitimately 28 defensive backs on scholarship. What the hell is happening? I think some of it was that.
Okay.
And, the other thing we have to remember with the defensive back room is that they've gone through a series of coaches. They've had 4 different position coaches in the last 4 years. There's no other position like that on Nebraska's roster.
Yeah, because I think Coop can evaluate like
John
a mother.
Butler. Yeah, no, I think there's a reason that Matt Rule regarded him in the way that he did. I think there's a reason that when Evan Cooper had his introductory press conference, he talked about his dream wasn't being a coach. It was being Mel Kiper Jr. This is a guy who clearly loves that aspect of it. The idea of it, though, is collecting that talent, feeling good about what you developed, then are they going to be able to come into a game for a veteran who has made repeated mistakes? Like, that's the next step.
Yeah.
And so, and we're going to see, like, the other thing is, we get caught up in talking about them playing as starters or whatever. Some of these guys are going to come in as rotational people throughout the games. Some of these guys are going to make their bones on special teams in 2025. Like, they are going to be special teams aces, and then they're going to get their real opportunity in the defensive backfield in 2026. Like, that's just, like, guys have to carve out what their roles are. And I don't mean to diminish whatever Evan Cooper has done in terms of stocking that defensive backfield room. It's more so to say that Nebraska, I think, has to be willing to play some of those younger guys.
I hear you.
And the fan base and the media have to be willing to accept some mistakes that happen if we're also going to be, crotchety over veterans who make the same mistakes like we were last year. I mean, like, you can't have it both ways. You can't want someone that has a wealth of experience, but then be upset if they make a mistake, but then not want to have a younger player who also might make a mistake. Like, that's just, Jeremiah Charles got to start against UCLA, and it wasn't a good game. But that was still really valuable for Jeremiah Charles, who Nebraska might need in 2025 to start a game.
He'd tell you today how valuable that game was, man. That's a great point, right? You got to go. It's what Coach Rule talks about, right? Going through the struggle a little bit, come out of the back end.
Yeah, I mean, he said there's pain that you have to have, and sometimes you have to fail and learn why you failed, and try to build yourself out of it. And then hope that, when you're put in the same situation, you can recall what it is that you did wrong and not do that again. I mean, that's the goal. I don't know how feasible or how likely that is to happen every single time, but it's certainly the goal.
That's our guy, Mike Schaefer, Husker247. Schaefer, we'll let you go so you can get to practice. We appreciate the time as always. I'm glad you and DB finally got to talk.
Hey, give me some good. Well, text.
Yeah.
I was killing him over text. I apologize. I'm back now, though, buddy.
I didn't even get a chance to mention this is the first time I've actually talked to you in like a month and a half. So, and then when you had the tweet that went out this morning and it was Austin Jacobson and Damon Benning, I was like, man, I'm never going to get the dream team all together.
Now listen, man, I never drove so fast to get here as to not miss the 9 o'clock seg with Mike J, man.
All right, guys, take care.
Appreciate it.